So far I am too. Well, the bromides first. Life is hard. I think we can all agree to that. And as with most things in this life, life itself would be so much easier if we all had been issued an instruction manual up front and read it completely. Well, we were issued one. Anybody remember that? Most of us got a copy. At least according to the sales figures, it's the most bought book ever throughout all time. But most people almost never read it. I've said before, one woman told me once that the only time I read my Bible is along with the preacher in church. I have seen them in the back dashboard of cars collecting dust. I see them everywhere. And every once in a while, I actually see one open in someone's hand. And they're actually awake and reading it. But with all that's going on in the world, it becomes very hard to apply its lessons if you don't have a strong belief that the words in this book can help you if you apply them correctly in your life. You have to believe that the problems that you encounter in this life have answers, which can be found in the Word, in the Bible. You have to have a belief that the words of the book are truly inspired by Yahweh and sum up the plan and message of his plan that he has for us in this life. And more importantly, the life to come. We forget about that. Most people in their conversation, after I die, that's it. We have learned along the way that you're not living to die, that you're living to live again. Most of us didn't hear that for a long time. A long time. We forget about that. Most of us can't think past this life. So we sin to do whatever we feel is justified to get what we want now. Because we doubt that there is a life to come after this one. But we forget about this promise from Yahweh in Revelation, the 2nd chapter, the 11th verse. Revelation, the 2nd chapter, the 11th verse. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. What? Surely we've heard this before. If there is a second death, surely there is a second life. Surely we all know this. The world poo-poos it as many religions do, as they teach it improperly. But it is here, therefore it is real. But we have to believe that the stories and characters of the book are valid, and that their lessons are examples for us to follow and live by. And you know more than anything else that you have to have a faith that says that whatever happens in this life, in the end, it will work for your good. You may not see it that way immediately, but at some point, if you remain faithful, the truth will emerge, and you will see Yahweh's hand in your life. And your faith must guide you to believe that even if you become ill and are not healed in this life, your faith will, if unshaken in your commitment to this truth, raise you from death in unending life and beyond. Because if you don't believe this is the word of God, you don't believe that either, most likely. But if those things are true, you will have a very tough life indeed. For nothing is promised in this world, save for problems. Job put it best in Job, the 14th chapter, the 1st verse. Man born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. He comes forth like a flower and withers. He also flees as a shadow and does not stand. And John warned us what would happen if we keep the faith and wind up in the end times. See if you've heard this before. Revelation, the 2nd chapter, the 10th verse. Revelation, the 2nd chapter, the 10th verse. Do not at all fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil will cast some of you into prison, so that you may be tried, and you will have tribulation 10 days. And I don't know that that is a literal 10 days or just a short amount of time. But it says here 10 days. Be faithful to death, and I will give you the crown of life. And whether it be 10 days literally or whatever, this promise is forever. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. There it is again. Those of you who have two witnesses, they are there. There they are. Most of us don't even want to think about the first death. And few believers who don't read the Bible at home have ever heard of a second death. But again, if there is a second death, surely there is another life. All of this is tied to faith and how we apply it in this life. This life is largely a test. Most of what goes on here is the result of much sin and corruption and corrupt thinking that went on and set down roots far before we were a gleam in our parents' eyes. It's going on for a long time, and it will continue to go on for a long time until that day. The world is far from what Yahweh intended, but he sees it as the perfect test of our willingness to, one, find his way and follow it, and two, prove that we are willing to follow it at any cost. Now, most of us really don't like to think too much about being tried and tested. But it all will happen, whether we want it to or not. However, there is one variable in all of this, and it is the only thing that we as individuals have any real control over. And that is how we deal with these lives with which we have given to us. How we handle our individual struggles, how we work together as members of our families, how aware we are of the circumstances extant in our nation and cities, how we can function according to Yahweh's law and live as citizens of the kingdom of Yahweh while here on the earth. And if we are baptized into Yeshua, this is what we are. And if we complete this mission according to the will of Yahweh, we will become kings and priests of Yahweh. For a title, if you want one, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And this is a short race when you think about it. The younger of us may think that 70 or 80 years is a long time, but believe me, it's not. Ask someone who has lived it. They will tell you that it goes by in the blink of an eye. And then there's that time between the beginning and the end. What do we do with all that time? And it doesn't matter if you're healthy, wealthy, homeless, whatever. And we're all going to have constant struggles in this life. Those struggles are guaranteed. And we know why. It's the same reason that mankind has struggled since Adam and Eve. And it's the same reason that we struggle right now. Sin. S-I-N. The world has been in some state of evil ever since Satan began to manipulate the world in his favor. Before we were born, Satan had already molded the world in his image and in his likeness. And anyone who doesn't bow down to that image is destined for trouble. If you remember that, in the time comes, that day is coming. That's his principal thing, being the selfish rascal that he is. He wants worship. What do I mean when I say bow down to him? I mean live selfishly and treat people as if they aren't as important as we are. I mean live arrogantly and act as if the world revolves around you. I mean to commit sin behind closed doors and ignore Yahweh's laws and Somebody did that before. I think it was ancient Israel, when they demanded a king and divorced themselves from the eternal Yahweh in order to be as all the other nations have been. The prophet Isaiah wrote of this and it will sound familiar. So turn to Isaiah, the 1st chapter, the 4th verse. Isaiah, the 1st chapter, the 4th verse. Our sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are your corrupters. I won't say that. But everywhere a youth movement is going on, the youngest are putting in charge of everything. Whoever has seen this girl that I don't even know where she comes from. I've seen her pictures in the stuff I've got on Epstein. This girl from Switzerland, is it, that keeps talking about all of this stuff about the climate change and all of that? How do you know that at 14 if somebody isn't feeding you that misinformation? That's what it says here, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken Yahweh. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger. They are gone away backward. They used to call that backslide. I haven't heard that term in a long time. Used to call it backslide. Why should you be stricken anymore? You will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot even unto the head, there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified with ointment. You'll have this out of your head by the time we eat. Verse 7. Your country is desolate. Pretty much. Your cities are burned with fire. Your land, strangers devour it in your presence. And it is desolate, as overthrown by strangers. And the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. And as we have seen so many times in the scriptures, Yahweh has backed away from Israel as a nation. He did it because of the things that they did in 1 Samuel 18. 1 Samuel 8. They asked for a divorce and backed away from him. He has decided to wait until the end times to deal with the people of Israel as a nation. This tells you that 1948 wasn't his doing. He just allowed it. Any book you read, they were brought back by England and the United States. Last time I read the Bible, England, and the United States were not Yahweh. He says in other places, he will bring them back. He is not dealing with them as a nation right now. The world believes that he is, but he is not. He left Israel alone as they sank deeper and deeper into paganism and idolatry. He sent his son Yeshua, and they denied him and asked Caesar and his government to kill him because they couldn't. Yahweh allowed his son to die in order that he could deal with us as individuals. There will be a national covenant, but we are now working with an individual covenant, washed in water, made in blood, through the bloody martyrdom of Yeshua at the stake of Calvary, or Golgotha, as the Bible says. As each of us went into the waters of baptism, we each affirmed the earnest of this new covenant in our blood as individuals. As we go through Yahweh's holy days, we should meditate on and consider the sacrifice that Yeshua has made for us all in order for us to come to him and be redeemed. And we should again contemplate what that sacrifice means to each one of us and be grateful that we were given that grace and not forsake it as the Israelites did for secular power. But they didn't even do it as a nation. They let the Pharisees do it for them. I wouldn't be them in the time to come. I'm not saying that they haven't got a chance, but they're skating on thin ice on a day like today. 50 degrees out there. Ice melting all over the place. And most people in this world don't believe that. And including these modern day Pharisees. I don't know who they are. That's above my pay grade. Faith, this word of Yahweh, is truth, and that its promises for us are real, even when they seem to be far from us. Faith that no matter what happens to us individually, somehow we can dig deeper and maintain a strong faith which will see us through these hard times. And we will go through some hard times here. Nahum wrote with this when Nineveh was besieged. Nahum, the first chapter, the 7th verse. Don't go there often. I'll give you a little time to find that one. Nahum, first chapter, the 7th verse. That's the stuff I'm reading these days, the stuff that we hadn't gone after very often. That's where the pearls are. Verse 7. Yahweh is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows them that trust in him. He knows us each and every one of us. If he can call all of the stars by name, surely he knows us. And he is seeing us through. And some of that method of seeing us through hard times, through the things that we can, some of that seeing us through hard times, we can do it for each other. As times get harder and harder, it is imperative that we get closer together. For it is just a fact of life that times are harder for some of us than they are for others. Yeah. If the Bible is true, and the rest of the world, let's look at something quickly. A couple of things. During the Passover supper with his disciples, Messiah gave a command which should resonate with us today in these tough times. Not a different command, as some say, but a more binding meaning on a command already given. John, the 13th chapter, the 34th verse. John, the 13th chapter, the 34th verse. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, as I have loved you. Think about that for a minute. He died for us all when we were in our sins. You should also love one another. He was about to die for them and all of us by extension. And he gave his disciples, and by extension, he also gave us this same command to love one another. This is to be our identifying sign in the world. The Sabbath will identify our mode of worship. Everybody else is going on some other day. But the Sabbath will identify our mode of worship. How we treat each other will show the world and show Yahweh how serious we are about it. John gave further instruction concerning this very important trait in 1 John, the 3rd chapter, the 11th verse. 1 John, the 3rd chapter, the 11th verse. For this is the message that you have heard from the beginning. There it is again. That's 2. That we should love one another. Not as Cain, who was of the evil one and killed his brother. Stark parallel there. And for what did he kill him? Because his own works were evil. And that's usually it. You do something slick and underhanded, and the other person gets it that did it right. And instead of going back and doing it right, you take his place and say you didn't do anything. And his brother's things were righteous. 13. Do not marvel, my brothers, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love the brothers. He who does not love his brother abides in death. Everyone hating his brother is a murderer. And at this level of thinking, your thoughts are like blows. You don't see that yet because it's not fully here yet. But there is a time coming when you would think something and it happens. He's preparing us for that now. You didn't hear about that much in other churches because they didn't want you to know about that, because they didn't know about it much. Because they didn't know about it doesn't make it unreal. But that's what they did in a lot of cases. The stuff that they didn't know about, you didn't touch it. But whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother having need and shuts up his bowels from him, how does the love of Yahweh dwell in him? And getting back to that other point, who had all the goods back then and wouldn't even give them to you if you were going out of your house? Couldn't make your payments in hard times. And the church could. I won't go there. That's a deep subject, and I haven't got any room to dig here. Verse 18. My children, let us not love in word or in deed, but in deed and in truth. Now, if the days of prophesied are to come, it is sure that eventually some of us will have to lay down our lives. But that time has not come as yet. Circumstances in tribulation will be far different than they are now. A lot of it is setting up now. Satan doesn't play checkers. He plays chess. He's in the long game. But his pieces are slowly being placed even now. These days, while creeping closer all the time, many of his chess pieces are already in place. His mark, for instance. For a long time, people didn't tell you what that mark was. Now they tell you, but they say it doesn't mean anything. You can take the mark of the beast. He will understand. Don't try that. Do not try that. Again, do not try that. It won't work the way you want it to anyway. In the meantime, if we know a brother or sister is hungry, it is our duty as people in Messiah to try to get food for them. If a brother is without work and wants to work, we have a means to try. Do so. Help that brother or sister find work. We who have a means to do so should do that. That one is not so easy in these times of COVID. A lot of jobs are folding up now because the mega corporations are taking over everything. And this is an intended consequence of all of this. I told you I was going to tell it as I found it. But that's another thing that I have found out. A lot of these mega corporations, Walmarts, Costco, the ones that have stuff coming from all over the world, are shutting down the little mom and pops in your neighborhoods. Right now it's a little bit harder to find work, but if you have a means of doing so, help a brother or sister out. When our family members are ill, let's visit them. Let's help each other out. A phone call alone sometimes can go a long way toward making the shut-in or lonely feel better. For we who have been here for a while, we know that as we dig deeper into the truth of Yahweh's word, our families don't always understand. Digging deeper into this word as the world is getting further away from it, the time is coming when it is possible that our church family may be the only family that we have. Look around you. How many of us are the only member of our families involved with the church? Any church. And how many of our family relationships have been strained because of our involvement with the church? That's a sad story in itself, but I won't dwell on it here. Only 2 of us left, and we have been split by that. But go on. We are here because we heard something or saw something that softened our hearts in such a way that Yahweh said, I saw something in that one that I can use. He felt that he could work with us. Yet, once we got into the church, Satan decided to go for skin with us, as he did with Job. In doing some looking around in the scriptures, I noticed something. Yahweh has never tested anyone. It is always Satan who does the testing. Adam, Eve, Cain, Joseph, Moses, Job. Job had some pushback on that one once. But the reality was, who claimed skin for skin? Wasn't Yahweh, was it? Who was it? Satan. The statement still is true. Satan does the testing. Adam, Eve, Cain, Joseph, Moses, Job, even Yeshua, our Messiah. It was always Satan who put them in the problematic situation by playing on their weaknesses. And I cringe when I hear people say that Yahweh has put you in a place to teach you something. I have never been in a school where a teacher went up to the blackboard and wrote down part of the answer, then challenged the class to find out where the question came from and what it is. That makes no sense. That's not good teaching anyway. Nowadays, with this Common Core stuff, you might have some teachers doing that. But it doesn't make sense. Using your common sense, you can come to understand that Yahweh is a being of love who wants only the best for you. But he only wants the best from you. Yahweh wants to see you defeat every enemy, conquer every foe, and deal constructively with every adversity of life. Yahweh is not sitting in heaven sending out true, false, or multiple choice exams to the children down below. He has a plan. He knows that because of that plan, life is going to be difficult enough for us all without his making things even more difficult by questions of faith. Because he knows who made it difficult for us. The words that get mixed up in the biblical rendering are sometimes interesting. In the Old Testament Hebrew, the word usually used in relation to Yahweh is the word nasah, to tempt or prove. Usually translated as test, trial, or prove interchangeably. Example, Exodus 16th chapter, the 4th verse. Exodus, the 16th chapter, the 4th verse. Then said Yahweh unto Moses, behold, I will rain bread for you from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. This test was proving whether they would keep the Sabbath. For Satan, the word is usually here, Messiah, caused despair through temptation. It should have been Nasa. But most people mistake that M for Messiah. And N place that Messiah there instead of Nasa. It fits better here, Messiah. Job, the 9th chapter, the 23rd verse. If the scourge slay suddenly, he will laugh at the trial of the innocent. That doesn't sound like Yahweh, does it? It really doesn't. Usually the Greek word for trial is dokomai, which means create trust through experience or peirai, to test for durability. Example in 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, the 12th verse. First Peter, the 4th chapter, the 12th verse. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though something strange happened unto you. But rejoice inasmuch as you are partakers of Messiah's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. Satan claims to want to see what you're made of, as he did with Job, but he actually has checked out your likes and dislikes. He has figured out what makes you tick and has put you in a position that challenges you and is confident that you will fail. Actually, he is sure that you will. Suffering is an instrument of Satan. For it is Satan who wants to see you fall. It is Satan who wants to see the drug addict use, the alcoholic take another drink, the weak person fall down, and the ego-filled person implode and lose their minds so that they can't possibly ever be wrong. It is Satan who delights in the death of young and old, the crippling of the young and the weak, and crippling also of the strong when it fits his purposes, and the destruction of the good or bad. It is not Yahweh's will that anyone should suffer. Messiah came to us and sent his Holy Spirit to us so that we could launch a counterattack against this suffering, pain, adversity, trauma, and misfortune. Yahweh has already given you in the Bible everything you need to get out of the situation spiritually. And if you do what is right, is to do what you know to be right, the situation will eventually straighten itself out. It may not happen as quickly as you want it to happen. We are an impatient bunch. But here, we can also help each other when problems come to us. We can support each other and make the situation easier. Not to be an enabler if it is an addiction, but to be there for each other when we have fallen into a sin. And know that we can't expect the person to behave perfectly when in a tough situation. Yes, they know the word of Yahweh. But we must understand that suffering eats away at faith. Trauma undermines faith. It is Satan's goal, by whatever means necessary, to see that you turn away as far away from possible, away from Yahweh at the first sign of trouble. Suffering and pain are Satan's weapons against you. These weapons are used indiscriminately against young and old, rich and poor, strong and weak. It is the random nature of suffering that makes the meaning of adversity so elusive. Satan knows that when an innocent child suffers, their adult parents are likely to doubt the love of Yahweh. Satan knows how to shred your faith to the core. In times of suffering and tragedy, it is your job to realize that he is the source of all suffering, Satan, the devil. It is so sad when seasoned pastors and ministers are on television offering no answers, when the world questions why Yahweh allowed tornadoes in Oklahoma, twisters and hurricanes in New Orleans, Texas to freeze, or other weather disasters anywhere else in the world. These men surely know that all weather was calm when the world was under the canopy of water. The world was a greenhouse. Water came up from the ground as a mist and watered all vegetation. There had, up to this point, been no rain on the earth until Yahweh punctured the canopy in the flood and allowed the water to fall to earth. That's where the oceans came from. Leaving only the ozone layer, as thin as it is, to protect us from the sun's harmful rays. And we wonder why so many have skin cancer. That's our fault, but only tangentially. These things were in motion before, as I said before, we were a gleam in our parents' eyes. Yet, the flood was the direct result of the sins of man. It is hard to tell a family that they have lost all that they own, possibly lost loved ones, in a story caused by someone else's sin. It is our job to comfort them, but also softly tell this truth. But it is the truth. And Satan uses it to imply that it is Yahweh's fault. In his quest to win the hearts of man, every tool is at Satan's disposal. Medicine, law, science, all of them are under the sway of Satan. How many have been killed with no tools in place to reward them because of these vaccines? And the world is already set up to not tell you about it, because whose world is this? All of them are under the sway of Satan the devil. Am I saying don't use these tools when you need them? No. I am saying that we take the advice that Messiah gave when he sent out his disciples into a world of Pharisees that hated their mission. Matthew, the 10th chapter, the 16th verse. Matthew, the 10th chapter, the 16th verse. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Doesn't much fold us in with Antifa, does it? Doesn't fold us in too much with Black Lives Matter, does it? 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Somebody read it. I didn't write it down. It came to my head. 1 Thessalonians 5:21.
All things hold fast what is good.
That's it. That's the key to life in these days of COVID. Test everything. This means we must be aware of what is happening around us. We must be aware that doctors are heavily influenced by the pharmaceutical industry. And their first answer for you is a drug, not something natural. And the latest medical discoveries, other than drugs and vaccines, are all questionable. This goes doubly in these days of COVID-19. Be aware of these latest trends and the latest scams. And don't trust based solely on a title or a degree or especially what you see on television. Most of that is paid advertising. Paid advertising. That's like the guy on the corner. Got that stuff. Got that stuff. Sometimes it's the same stuff. We don't get that one until we get home. Start spinning in the head or something. Be as wise as serpents, but as gentle as doves. We are not here to fight against the world. That is Elohim's job, not ours. Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, the 35th verse. Almost done. Vengeance belongs to me, and recompense, for at the time their foot slips, because the day of their disaster is near, and fate comes quickly for them. 2 Thessalonians, the first chapter, the 5th verse. In testimony of the just judgment of Yahweh, that you may be counted worthy of the kingdom of Elohim, for which you also suffer. Don't forget that. Seeing it as a just thing with Yahweh to recompense tribulation to those that trouble you. There it is. The revenge is coming. And he has the rule over all things. He doesn't call it revenge. He calls it what it is. Justice. Seeing it as a just thing with Yahweh and recompense tribulation to those that trouble you. And to give you who are troubled rest with us when the Master Yeshua shall be revealed from heaven with the angels of his power. That's us if we hang in there. With flaming fire to take vengeance on those who do not know Yahweh and do not obey the gospel of our Master, Yeshua Messiah, who shall be punished with momentary discomfort. No, it's a little bit longer than that. Punished with eternal destruction. And that's not, as some say, a fire that burns forever. It only burns until you go out. It only burns as long as you still there. That isn't long. By the presence of the Master and by the glory of his power, we shall come to be glorified in his saints and be admired in all those that believe, because our testimony among you was believed in that day. But to navigate our way through it in wisdom, true wisdom comes from Yahweh. The world is against Yahweh and anything that points to Yahweh. A look beneath the surface will make this apparent to anyone who is studying their Bibles and working with the Spirit within them. We are heading into a time when it will be generally tough all around. Satan is waiting for us to make mistakes and waiting for chances to make us lose faith. But we must be strong in Yahweh and in his word. We must be willing and able to look beyond the problems of the day. And for some of us, these problems are really tough. Disease is tough. Death is tough. Unemployment is tough. Loneliness is tough. Incarceration is tough. Disillusionment is tough. But we all have to be trusting enough to confide in each other when we are feeling under the gun. And we also must prove ourselves trustworthy enough not to make our brothers and sisters the subject of gossip when they tell us something. All of these things we must do if we want to see the kingdom of Yahweh. But to see the end and make it into the kingdom, we have to strengthen our faith. Hebrews, the 11th chapter, the first verse. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We were talking about that this morning, Thurman. Hebrews, the 11th chapter, the 6th verse. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to Yahweh must believe that he is and all that. He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. By faith, Noah, having been warned by Yahweh of the things not seen, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by which we condemn the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. Hebrews 11:7. By faith, Noah, being warned by Yahweh of things not seen, rain principally, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by which he condemned the world and became heir of righteousness, which is according to faith. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out into a place which he was afterward going to receive for an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he went. By faith, he lived in the land of promise as a stranger, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs of the same promise with him. For he looked for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is Elohim. Jump down to 37. They were stoned. They were sawed in two. Were tempted. Were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented. The world was not worthy of them. How would you like Yahweh to imply that the world was not worthy of you? It can happen. There is one more chance happening in the future where this would happen. They wandered in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. Verse 39. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, did not receive the promise. What? Yet. Verse 40. For Yahweh had provided some better thing for who? 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 Get it right. That they should not be made perfect without who? 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 Get it right. We're going to have something to do. Two, in the end. Wait for it. Pray for strength. Bottom line, if we begin in sin, no matter how badly, if we end baptized in Yeshua, Messiah, and turn from our worldly and evil ways, we will make it into Yahweh's kingdom. Yahweh is willing and wants all mankind to repent and return to him. He will know your heart inherently. He does not do what the NSA does. He needs no cameras and technology and your washing machine spying on you and all of that. Y'all laughing, but come down here and take it apart. Yeah, I've done that. Somebody, Ruby was it, I believe, gave me a one of those little things that you got cable through, and I looked in there and found a little camera in the thing. I threw it away and gave her one that wasn't having that in there. And they constantly laugh when I say this stuff, but the stuff is there, and it's there for a reason. That's a whole sermon in itself, of all the stuff that You notice in these new flat screen TVs, that little light that doesn't go off when you turn the TV off? That's a camera. Yeah, they're spying us all the time. And anybody that trusts its people that little, they're pointing at you, but the telling thing is the three pointing back at them. Any questions? Thurman.
Just for clarity, so the Father may test us or prove us to see our obedience, but Satan that tempts us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
All these trials and troubles to knock us off course.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Dwayne.
A little bit off subject. Maybe you saw this. Dr. Rand Paul was questioning.
Oh man,
What?
I saw that and I lost my lunch.
From the stevedores. And he didn't answer questions about whether or not you're going to send the boys into it or not. And you know they are.
Yep.
Better before that.
Every time he asked the question with more clarity, he went off the range and answered something else about the equality of these things. And I don't know where in the world he got that from, that a 6 foot, 220-pound man has a fair fight against Simone Biles, 4'11", and wringing wet 80, 90 pounds. That's not fair. That's not fairness. That's something else.
The girls
Programming.
like that come up in their team, just walk away, don't even play.
It's a little stretch of the imagination that is a fairness doctrine for Title IX. That's not fair to anybody that the little boys that couldn't win in their class division, and now they can play against girls that they can perhaps beat. Any more? The world is going crazy, and don't go with it. It's not a good place.